It's that time of the year again, and I'm preparing to send out some Christmas cards. One of which I'm preparing to send out is this uh, micro SD card. Now, this one is going to be pre-configured to do a firmware update to a device, install some games and some other things. Now, time is kind of short, so I don't have enough time to really get this configured the way that I want it to be, the way that I think my friend will be able to appreciate it the most, and get it in the mail on time. So I've decided to make a compromise. What I am sending is an almost blank memory card, but it will have an application on it. That application is made to download the files and distribute them over the memory card in a way that they need to be there. I did make the code for this available on GitHub if you want to take a look at it. Now, because of expediency, there are some features I would like for this to have that it doesn't have. I just had to make a decision on what the most likely scenarios were, and there are some potential error conditions that I'm just ignoring for now, such as the internet connection not being available or dropping while the download is occurring. So this is a bit happy path. I might come back to it later to refine it a good bit more, but for the sake of getting something in the mail, I went ahead and I wrote this in about an hour or so, tested it out, found that it worked, and now I'm recording this video just before I go ahead and drop this in the mail. I wrote this as a WPF application in which I have externalized some of the settings for this. So if I wanted to use it for something else, it would just be a matter of changing some files without necessarily changing the source code. Now, jumping into the source code, I'll just go straight to the things that matter. Most of the things that matter are inside of this view model folder. So let's take a look at what's in there. We're going to start off with the payload information. Now, I had mentioned that it will reach out to a URL to try and grab information on what it is supposed to download. And so the things that it can be downloading, they could be files that are just going to be downloaded, put in place. They could be zip files, in which case it's going to download them, decompress them, and put those in place. Or it could just be a request to create a folder. And so those are the three types of payloads that it expects to find within the list. And the information that is going to be encoded within this list is, of course, going to be the payload type, so that it knows what to do with this item within an array. Where the item is coming from, if applicable. Of course, this will not be used for the folder. The path, the target path, so for folders, this will be the folder name to create. Otherwise, it is the folder in which to place the file or which to decompress the zip file. Version number is not being used. That was something I was thinking about, but I went ahead and dropped it. It remains as a vestige of future intentions. The view model and delegate commands, those are just some base classes that I've talked about before, and I also have a blog entry on them. If you want to see more about what those do, you can find that blog entry at this URL, but they're not really doing anything special. View model just contains some events and something to make it easier to raise events whenever properties are changed. And delegate command, that's something that exists just so I can write functions that are going to be bound to buttons. And in the case of this application, the only delegate command is being bound to a download button. When they hit that, that's going to kick off the download process. So the meat of the functionality is going to be within the main view model. Now, within the main view model, this URL that you see at the top, that's actually the URL to where I talk about those other two base classes that I mentioned. Moving down further, you can see that I create a queue, and this queue is just going to have a list of all of the assets that need to be downloaded, along with keeping track of what the current item is that's being worked with, the current payload. This is something that's being done with multiple threads, so just keep the threads coordinated. I do have the auto reset event. When I start downloading something, it gets downloaded on another thread, and while it's downloading, the routine that requested the download will sit and wait until this auto reset event gets flagged for it to continue. Now, I also will be updating the download progress. So as a file is being downloaded, we'll see it go to 5%, 6%, 10%, so on up until it gets up to 100%. So as the file download progress changes, I just update it to this variable, and this variable is bound to a text box that's on the screen, so they will see that number reflected. Oh, it's actually bound to, I'm sorry, it's bound to a progress bar, so they will see the bar get bigger as that percentage goes up higher. The download label will just let somebody know what's going on. So as it's downloading file ABC, that label will let you know that. And a phase just updates a person on whether or not something is downloading versus decompressing. So we have those variables that are just primarily there to be bound to the UI so that there's feedback. I thought it was very important to get feedback because downloads can take a while and you need to see that something is going on so that you know that the application is not locked up. When the application starts, I grab whatever the URL that's going to have the list of files from these settings. So ultimately, this is being grabbed from a JSON file in a compiled application, so that can be changed after compile time. I request the temporary file path from the system. This way, as the file is downloading, it initially downloads to this temporary path before it gets either copied or decompressed to its final path. And then the system can take care of making sure that those files are cleaned up. Part of the reason I'm downloading it somewhere else before I move it is I want to make sure that only complete files make their way to the file system, and this helps better ensure that. There's still some scenarios where you can end up with an incomplete file, such as a power failure or somebody pulling a memory card out of the system while it is downloading. But this just reduces the chances for something happening. So if I end up with a disruption from the internet while a file is downloading, I will not have a partial file on the memory card. The background image is just something that's there for decoration, for theming the application. And that's pretty much it as far as the construction goes. So nothing happens until they press the download button. When they do press the download button, that is when, let's scroll down to the delegate command. Here we go. So when they do press the download button, this is when this delegate command gets kicked off. So I reach out to the server and I request the list of files and I add that to the queue. Once I started to the queue, I start the download thread, and then I have the application update the download button to disable it so that you can't have two concurrent downloads going on. As far as how the download process works, within my download routine, I create a new HTTP client. For each file or zip file that is within the download list, I just read what its URL is, I download it to a temporary path, and then I move it to the target path. In the case of a zip file, after the file is downloaded, instead of just moving it, of course, I need to decompress it. And so you see I'm using system.io compression zip file extract to directory. So that will put the contents of the zip file to the folder, and we'll let the person know that, hey, this is decompressing, because the decompression step, that can take a while. And if I didn't let them know, they might think that the system's locked up. In the case of a folder, if I see that someone wants a folder created, then I just create that folder. Something else that I do, for that download list that I grabbed from the server, I check to see if it's using the ... which will go to a parent directory, or I check that it's using a colon, which could be indicative of going to a drive or to the alternate data stream that's on a file. Neither one of those is allowed. Also, if the path starts off with a backslash, then that's indicative of possibly trying to get out of the root directory for the application. If any of these are encountered, I just throw a new exception. That should not happen since I'm the one that's controlling the files, but in theory, if someone were to ever get a hold of my file list and modify it, this restricts where they could potentially write malicious files. But that's it. When this friend gets this memory card, the only thing he should have to do is to run the setup.exe, and everything else will go from there. After it's done, he'll be able to put this memory card in the device, and it's good to go. We've got some time until Christmas. If you see my clock in the lower right-hand corner, we've got another 13 days. I've got some traveling and other things to do before Christmas, but sometime between then and now, I'll be updating the files that I have on my server so that they reflect what I think he'll want to have initially for his game system. So if you think this code is useful, you can find it on my GitHub repository. Additionally, I will be putting a blog post on my blog over at j2y.net about this. If you like this content and want to see more like it, be sure to follow and subscribe. Until next time.